Hello friends. If you've ever been interested in making your own beef jerky or beef jerky sticks, snack sticks, maybe you weren't quite sure of how to go about it or were a little intimidated by the process. Well, today I'm going to be making some snack sticks. I'm going to show you the equipment that you'll need, kind of my own recipe without giving away too many secrets, and just show you the process because it is tremendously easy, simple. It is, considering the fact that you can do this once you make the initial investment, you're going to be able to make sticks for years to come. I've been doing this for years. I've kind of perfected a recipe that fits my tastes, and you will be amazed at how good a quality product you can make and also what an impression it can make on others. So, of course, I'm going to be time-lapsing this so that you don't have to watch the entire video. We will talk first about the items that you will need, and I'll try to cover everything, and then we'll go about the process itself. So, stay tuned. We are beginning with my complete setup. The only thing that is not on the table are Ziploc bags. I like to use sandwich size Ziploc bags to separate my finished product into, but I'm just getting started. So moving left from right, in the back there you see my dehydrator. We'll look at it closer in a minute. There is a bowl that I use to mix my product. There in front I have 2 pounds of ground meat. Then I have a jerky gun and my spices, and that's it. So without taking more time, let me talk about each item. First, this is the Nesco made by American Harvester dehydrator. This one is no longer available as far as I can find, but you can still pick these up used. And I want you to notice why I think this one is an advantage. Notice the thermostat. I can drop this particular unit down to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit and go up to about 155 degrees. This makes this unit so much of an advantage because I can dry fruits, which typically require lower heat settings, and I can dry meats, higher heat settings, and everything in between. This thing comes with a series of trays. Now, if you look at this tray, notice that they are fragile, and usually the breaking comes from washing. So I'll talk to you about some things that you can do. What I did is actually bought a second unit that had the same kind of trays, even though it was a different head. And you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trays. This will do a good 4 pounds of meat in the way that we're going to be preparing them today. As simple as it can be though, any kind of mixing bowl, the mixing bowl varies with the amount of meat that you do. Usually I do 3 pounds at a time, and I'll talk to you about my mix in just a minute. But today we're only going to be doing 2 pounds, and you can do as small as 1, but you'll see why in a minute why I use multiple pounds. Then for this particular snack, the most important thing you're going to have besides your dehydrator is the actual jerky gun. This one is made by Lynn. Now, these white funnels here are not original. The Nesco unit, when it was new, came with a small, they look like caulking guns. You can see what they are here. And that gun was not as durable. I have cured a number of different meats, including ground beef or hamburger. And ground beef, if you've not done this before, is the most difficult to push through a gun. And when you have a cheap gun, basically it's stripped out. So I like these, but this has a very strong ratcheting mechanism. But these are your tubes, and if you'll notice, that's a really large hole in this one. Now this is for the flat ones, but that's very thick. What I typically do, because I like small ones, to use my hand here, I drop my Nesco down inside this, and then I can clamp them both into the gun just fine. It fits perfectly. So just find a gun that you can use. If you're going to be doing this a lot, it is worth the investment. This unit, when it was new, cost like $39.95. They used to be carried at Walmart. I don't know what Walmart carries because once you have one, you don't go back and shop for these things. And that was coming with the dehydrator and the snack gun. I had to replace the snack gun, so this was another, I forget, I got it off of Amazon, 30 to 40 bucks. It might have been $29.95. I don't remember. Don't be afraid to spend the money because you're going to be using these again and again and again. Then you're going to need your collection of spices, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But I want to talk to you about meat. I have used ground turkey, which is we have here. I have used ground beef, ground pork, ground chicken, and today I'm going to be using ground lamb. So this will be a first for me, but let me tell you a little bit about the consistency of the various meats. Now this is just, in our area, the local grocery store is the Food Line. This is their store brand of ground turkey. Ground turkey is the easiest to process, and it is the most neutral flavor of meat that I have found. Now, I like my spices. I like the flavorings that I have added. So I like a relatively neutral base or meat because that accentuates the spices that I'm going to be used. But turkey also dries more quickly and it can become almost powdery if you over dry it. So what I have learned to do is to mix my meats. Today we're going to be mixing 1 pound of turkey, 1 pound of pork. Typically speaking, I would do 1 pound of turkey and maybe 2 pounds of pork. I said pork, this is lamb. I typically do 1 pound of turkey and 2 pounds of pork. Today I'm going to be doing a 1-to-1 mix, and we'll simply mix the meat in our bowl, then we will season it and go from there. Now, when it comes to seasoning, I'm going to give you the most important spices. This is not the most important, but it's the second most important. Plain old everyday black pepper. Now, you're going to see that I do like my jerky to have a bit of spice to it. Black pepper is underrated. If you've had it on your table in a shaker all these years, you may not realize just how powerful the flavor of ground pepper, black pepper, is. So I have found this to be of great assistance in producing a wonderful flavor. Next to it, for my taste, lemon pepper. Lemon pepper has a blend of peppers, but that citric taste gives you a very unique flavor that you don't find in store-bought jerky. And then you'll notice I have a bag of Morton Tender Quick, which is, it's simply a salt that is more beneficial when it comes to curing meat. So if you don't have Tender Quick, now I found that our local grocery store did not carry that. Or if they did, it was always out. So I had to order this. You can use regular table salt. Now, I say that with this caveat. You are not going to be, or I'm not going to be making jerky that I'm going to then store for 2 years. I'm lucky for mine to last 2 weeks because it's that good. The other spices that you see, I have some Italian seasoning, some red pepper flakes, a various kind of, there's some cloves there. Here we have some allspice, which I did not find terribly effective. Crushed red pepper. Sage is really good. That's in your sausage. But this is my go-to. Don't look at the label. What I have here is a mixture of spices that includes a little bit of salt, but not much. Lemon pepper, which has salt in it. That's where I get my salt content. Some black pepper, but especially some ground red pepper, cayenne, and I put a little bit of dried ground habanero. One of the differences in my recipe that will be different from others, these spices do not go into the meat itself. I will mix black pepper, my curing salt, and my lemon pepper. Well, the one thing I will use, where is it? I will use the crushed red pepper sparingly. I want it hot but not painful. But when I mix my meat, I put just these spices into it, and you will use 1 teaspoon of salt per pound of meat. So you can see this is a 2-pound bag of Morton salt. This is going to last me for quite some time. I'm going to be using 2 teaspoons of salt. The other spices are going to give you plenty of preservative factor in addition to what you're getting from the salt itself. But what I use this local or homemade concoction with is what I call, you would call it in other disciplines, a rub. So once I extrude my meat onto my trays, then when the tray is full, I take my shaker and put a light coating of, from a farmer's standpoint, we call it top dressing. I am taking a rub and putting it on there. So I've got flavor in the meat, and then I've got flavor on the outside of the meat, and it has made for me a tremendously pleasant flavor. Now, so that you'll know, you can see, if you're looking closely, some of the red pepper flakes in there. You can use the crushed red pepper if you want to get a more consistent, but I like the flakes. And if you're going to do that, be sure you use the wrong side. Use one that has big enough holes. Now those holes are relatively small, but they're big enough. But I would not go any smaller with a dispenser. This was a lemon pepper dispenser. So that gives you a wonderful flavor on the outside, and you can take that flavor in a number of directions. Another direction that you can go that I have not done is to use something sweet, either sugar or even brown sugar. I would prefer white sugar to brown sugar simply because the brown sugar is much worse about attracting moisture and clumping up, and we don't want that. So the next thing we're going to do is mix the meat, and then I'm going to show you some tricks. There's one other thing that's not on my table here. You need a can of non-stick cooking spray. I put a light coating on my trays. Not only does it keep the meat from sticking to the tray, it makes the tray so much easier to clean. So I don't have to get in there with a scrub sponge or something and push so hard until I break the grates in the thing. Also, let me undo these here. I'm having to operate with one hand because I left my tripod at our church. So give me 1 second here. See if I can get this off. Oh, I see what's happening. Yeah. The other advantage of this kind of dispenser is you can take it completely off of the gun. There's the gun. And I always take and spray the inside of this with that nonstick spray. That will allow the meat to flow through far more easily. So as I go, I'll also spray my funnel, and after I run 1 or 2 units through here, I'll spray it again very briefly just to keep the meat moving easily. If you like ground beef hamburger, you will find that this will be tremendous in assisting that because it is such a thick meat. Also, another advantage of turkey that I have found, if you do ground beef and you get the store grade of beef, which is usually about 30% fat, it'll be 70% meat, 30% fat, the bottom of your tray will fill up with oil that comes out of the meat. If you use the higher grade of ground beef, 80% or even 93%, you get much less oil, but it's even harder to work through. With turkey, and the same thing with pork, I don't get any oil residue in the bottom because I use pretty good stuff. And I'm assuming the lamb is going to be the same way. I'm not sure how much fat they introduced in the grinding process. But these are the things that you're going to need. Don't be afraid to try different spices. The one spice, the most important spice, is going to be your salt. Make sure that you have either regular table salt. I prefer iodized salt with the iodine in it. Or I ordered this Tender Quick. If you order the Tender Quick, it's $3 or $4 for 2 pounds, which is going to last forever. After I open this pack, I will put it into a gallon-sized freezer bag to help protect it from accumulating moisture over time. So let's get ready to do some meat. All right, now I've got my setup complete. There's one other piece of equipment that you're going to need. You're not going to have to buy it because you've got one of these, a standard tablespoon or teaspoon, not the big tablespoon, the smaller of the two. So what I've done is simply open my meat. I have placed it into my mixing bowl. And before I begin to blend the meat together, I want to begin by simply putting in my spices. I always start with the salt because the salt is not added to taste. The salt is actually put in measured quantities according to the weight of the meat. I've already told you I use 1 spoon per pound of meat, so I'm going to have two spoons. Now, I don't level the spoon all the way down. You'll find that this salt is a little bit, it's not as smooth measuring as the other. So there's a little bit of a heaping spoonful. I put it right on my meat. It's almost powdery as you put it in, which means it's not packed down quite as much. So I just shake it down just from the most volume that I would have, and just get that out of the way. Next, I like black pepper. And what I do with black pepper, let me get my meat kind of separated here. I like to actually cover the meat. So I actually use the open portion of this. Let me get my camera here and show you what I'm doing. I like to just cover the meat. I don't know if I'm able to see, if you're able to see that. Now, I'm not talking about a thick coat here, but I basically want to discolor the meat. I want most of the meat that I see here is now black. Then I go with my lemon pepper, and these are the shakers I really like because you can get a lot of product through. I do basically the same thing. I'm going to cover the surface of my meat, and with lemon pepper, I actually do it pretty generously. You're going to see why I don't mix the meat first, because you're going to have to mix the meat anyway. And then last, I give a light addition of red pepper flakes. So enough to give me some flavor, but remember, I'm going to be adding that flavor back at the end of my process after I have extruded the sticks. So you see there, I've got a good yellow color. I've covered my salt that went in first. I covered the black pepper, and you can see a lot of product down there. And then I'm simply going to take my hands and work this together. But I need both hands. So in this particular instance, I can't give you a lot. I can start with one hand here. Make sure your hands are clean, and you just start working it together. My goal is, number one, to get all the product that's in the bottom of the bowl into the meat. Number two, to get all the product worked through all the meat. And then number three, to get the 2 kinds of meat, or I have done 3, but I'm not crazy about 3 different kinds of meat. Get your meat blend to a consistency where you have it equally present in every part of the meat. So I'm going to mix this for just a couple of minutes. I have used, if you have one of those old-fashioned mashed potato mashers, those work really good. Do the same thing I told you about with the cooking spray. Put the cooking spray on it so that the product won't stick to it. But just work this stuff through, and I'm done. I'll be ready to extrude my product. One of the things that is very helpful in mixing the meat is your technique. Now, I told you about, and I've still got meat on my hands here, so yes, it should look greasy. I use my fingers to begin with, but when I get going, basically, I'll just pile the meat up and press down. And as you press down, the meat is going to push against the bottom of the bowl here, and it really spreads it out and gets your seasonings distributed through all the meat. So after that initial kind of working it with my fingers, and I only have to use one hand, I don't even get my other hand dirty, I just press down, press down, press down. And if you'll notice here in the bottom of the container, I don't have a sticky residue. I don't have any spices left. It picks up everything, and it works wonderfully. So that technique will be of advantage to you as well. I've got to tell you that the lack of my tripod is really aggravating, but I wanted to make this video. I've been wanting to make this video for a while. And by the way, if you're watching, this is my first video of, I don't know exactly what to call it, but if you've never done it before, these videos are for you. So what I've done now, off camera, I sprayed my tray. And when you spray your tray, here, let me get the tray. Don't spray it down, spray across, and that will allow it you'll lose less spray that way. I've sprayed the inside of my jerky tube, and I like to put the meat in it with both ends off, which is of course the way that they tell you to do it, but it's the way that nobody does it. Most of the time we don't want to take the gun off the back because it's an extra step. Always keep you some paper towels handy, by the way. So what I tend to do, what I found that when I have one end closed and you start putting meat in, you end up with air pockets in here. And as you're extruding, as you're pumping this stuff out, caulk. Imagine you're caulking, weather stripping some part of your house and there's an air bubble in between. You don't get a nice even bead of your product. So what I have found, and I just use my spoon, put it on the bottom of the bowl here, and I just take a spoonful at a time and place it in my tube, and you'll notice how easily that slides down. Slides right off the spoon. That's because I put my non-stick spray in there. Does not affect the meat. By the way, I talked to you about hamburger and how thick it is. I have found that if I use very lean meat and I'm having trouble getting it to process through my gun, I can add some oil, and sometimes I'd simply do it by spraying the oil directly onto the meat and then go back and mix it again to give a greater oil content. And once I do this, it's such an easy thing. You don't fill up the last part. See, I've got just a little space here. That's the part you put into your gun. Make sure it's straight, tightening down. I pushed a little bit out the top, just cut that off, and I've already greased the inside of my funnel. So you simply place this on here, tie it down. Now, again, I need both hands for this process, so I'll show you after the fact the extruded product. There are a couple of choices that you're going to make. You've noticed that my dehydrator is round. I used to spiral mine around and around and around. My kids hated it because I would simply stand here and pump it and make them turn the product. I have found that for the final product, I like straight sticks, and I can then trim them to the length that I want for my bag. It doesn't matter. What you want to do is to get them as close to each other as you can to maximize the use of your space while leaving just enough room for the air to go through. These are forced air dehydrators. So the first time or the first few times you do this, it will be harder to keep them straight. Don't worry about that. If they touch here and there, don't worry about that. You just don't want two products touching all the way along. Try to get a little space between them, and that will benefit you in the dehydration process. Okay, what you see is the first tray of product that I have now extruded onto the drying rack itself. At this point, now I had all the racks stacked, so I was actually working on the top of an empty rack. Before you put your rub on the outside, you have a bottom plate here, your base for the unit. Take all the racks off and just put one on here. And then I'll show you how I just work along. And you shouldn't probably on camera see this spice coming out, but that's it. It comes out through these small holes. It does not come out. Now, you see this little piece here? I love it when I have some very small pieces, because as you're getting near the end of the drying process, it's great to be able to pull out a small piece and test it, see if it's properly dry, to see if its consistency, you don't want to let it get too dry, but you don't want to leave it too moist. So some little test strips are wonderful for that. Then I simply take my next tray, I will extrude my product on that and then season it. Any seasoning that falls between the cracks lands on the meat below. All right, now we're looking at the end of the process. I have 2 pounds of meat extruded out into 3 trays. So it's a good amount, and you'll see some other videos and the guys do a good job, but one of the things I disagree with them on, some of them will put their meat a long way apart. If you have a fan-forced dehydrator, minimal space is all that is needed. This will dry very well. The last thing I'll do is simply place the top on, and I'm going to put it over in that chair because that's where the wall outlet is. A setup like this will typically take plus or minus, depending on how you like the product, the finished product to feel. I am somewhere between 5 and 6 hours. So for me this morning, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. I finished this, and by the middle of the afternoon, by 5 o'clock tonight, I'm going to be done. Now, I want you to notice, these are the tools I've used. And I've not done anything to clean them up. You see, there's a little bit of meat there. The hardest part to get out, because this is such a small tube, is this. And I may try this when I turn the video off. Sometimes I'll clean the nozzle off, and since I'm the only one who eats this, I can actually blow, and because I've greased this when I started, I might get the tube that's inside there out. Otherwise, you just have to wash it off. But notice, let me pull this open here. Looking down in there, there's not a bit of wasted meat. Spraying with the cooking spray, your unit will make a great advantage for you, both in the loss of wasted product as well as in cleanup. So there's my mess to wash. I'll have 3 trays to wash. The majority of what I'll be able to do is to run my water very hot and use my sink sprayer to wash these, and it's going to get just about everything off, and then very gently use my wash rag. Any product that's left is completely dry and dehydrated, so it's not like you have decomposing meat there. You can literally, if you don't get it with a wash rag, once it dries, you can flick it off with your finger and you're done. So when the process is done, we'll come back and have a look at the final product. All right, I'm back with you now. It is late in the afternoon. Last video I ended at about 11 o'clock this morning. It's now 4:35 or so in the afternoon. And it's been a busy day. I've been painting outside. I mowed a good part of the yard, ran to town, and came back and checked my jerky. And we are ready. So I just want to show you the final process. Once we're done, which I just unplugged it a few minutes ago, product looks like this. If you'll notice, the tray isn't nearly as full. That's why I tell you to fill your tray up, because it shrinks incredibly. And in front of me here, you see the white is simply some paper towels. Just take your product out, your beef sticks, or in this case, turkey and lamb, and lay them on here. Now, as far as texture, if you look at this, I know you can't feel it, but this is almost crunchy. The outer edge is quite crunchy. My dog knows exactly what I've got on the table, and he wants some. But as it cooled, as it cools, it tends to gravitate a little bit towards the, not the raw side, but the less crunchy side. So our second tray made a nice picture, didn't it? And you're going to put them on paper towel here. What this does, if there is any moisture, I don't know if you can see that, but there's just one little, it almost looks like a bead of sweat. And what it is oil. These are very dry. I'm very pleased that the pork turned out like it did. But if there's any oil left, it allows the paper towels to simply absorb them and for them to cool. Once you've done that, my last tray, and if you'll notice here, they're just rolling right off the tray. If you don't use that spray, you can tear these things all to pieces. Just getting them out of the trays, because the meat will often adhere to the tray. Now, I suspect that the more oil that you have in your meat, the more problem you will have with it. So I just lay that out, and you can see the granular nature of all of the spices that hit the bottom. And can I turn this up? Can you see around the edges? It's hard for me to tell on here, but there's a sheen of oil. I would doubt that there is a quarter teaspoon of oil in this entire tray. So you don't have any problems with, it's one of the things I love about turkey. You don't have any problems with overflowing container. When I did beef years ago, ground beef, and especially the ground beef that had the higher fat content, there might be so much that it would actually overflow this bottom tray. So now, simple kitchen shears, and I grabbed a small handful of sandwich bags. And typically what I'll do, there's the size I like. This size is going to fit right in the bag, and I'll use one as my guide, and I'll clip all the other ones as close to this as I can. Now I've got some that are already shorter because they're broken or they were on the edge of the tray. That's fine. You need some sampling material while you're working here. So this is an easy way to make whatever, I started to say beef sticks, but meat sticks treats that are, I will tell you this, once you settle upon your recipe, you're going to find that these are better than anything that you can buy anywhere. In fact, years ago, my son was at an automotive college, about 100 miles away from here. And from time to time, I would make up a batch and box them up and just send them to him UPS, because they'll keep for a long time, weeks. It doesn't hurt to refrigerate them, but I've got enough salt in these. I'm not even worried, especially since they're good and dry. I'm not worried about them turning on me anytime soon. But I would mail these to him, and I thought it would be good for him over the next several weeks to have, some snacks from home. Well, he'd take a bag or two and then sell them, and he sold every single one he could get his hands on because people love them that good. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. One of the ingredients I didn't tell you about my rub, I used some garlic in there. I've also tried onion powder, different things. But the lemon pepper, I think, is by far the most flavorful thing here. The lamb came out a little, I don't know if denser maybe is the better word, than turkey and pork. Turkey and lamb, but there's a reason for that. I'm using a different consistency as well, a 1-to-1 rather than a 2-to-1. So don't be afraid to experiment. So if you were to buy these today, and by the way, I looked back over the earlier video, and you probably thought that the top of my dehydrator was filthy. It actually isn't. I've been using this thing so many years that I guess when I handle it and have the oils on my fingers, which I keep a paper towel to do that, it actually adhered to that. I've cleaned that with bleach, so it is clean, it is sanitary, but it is also stained. And that's just the factor of having used it so many times. So I see these things on like Facebook Marketplace from $10 to $20. If it has all the trays, you should jump on that. Another plus or minus $30. There are a number of very good jerky guns out there. So I've got about $50 in the set. Now, my set was bought new, so it cost me a little more. Well, it was a gift from the family, so it didn't cost me, but but for roughly $50, you can have a set that will work for you for years and years, and you cannot begin to estimate, number one, the money that you will save. Right now, a pound of turkey, I forget if I caught it on sale for $2.99 or it was $3.99. The ground lamb was probably $4.99 to $5.99. So I've got $10 in meat here. If I were to make one bag of this up, here's one of the long sticks. You're going to pay $1.75 or $2 in the store for an individually wrapped stick. Well, I got 100 of them here. So you see that it is quite economical, and the taste is just out of this world. So if you've never done it before, now you've got a guide that you can do it on your own. If you come up with ideas, feel free to leave them in the comment section underneath the video. And I hope that you'll subscribe to the video and offer us a like if you appreciate the video, and there will be more to come. Thank you so much. Well, this is kind of a PS, but I've just bagged all of my jerky, and I want to show you what I've got here. I've got 3 bags of the length that I typically use, and then all of my little broken pieces I put in a 4th bag. So there are the 3 bags, and then you can see the 4th bag. But I also wanted you to see why you want to use paper towels. I hope that you can see all the particulate. That's the rub, that because this meat is so dry, the rub in falling off and moving around here, it falls off onto the thing. It's nice not to have a big mess on your table, because most of the tables have a leaf section in it, which means there's a joint, and that seasoning can get down into the joint. So the paper towel is a really good precaution to take. It makes cleanup a lot easier. Thank you so much for watching.